You are with Cape Talk.
Views and News with Clarence Ford.
Welcome back. It is 9:35. Views and News through till 12 o'clock on this Friday. Smile Day across the world. And of course, that big appointment between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. That's the time when we speak to a lecturer at the University of Cambridge, Dr. Chris Smith, better known in these parts as the Naked Scientist. He joins us on air every Friday just after 9:30 to answer your questions. Welcome to you, Dr. Chris Smith.
Hi, Clarence. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I missed you last week.
Yeah, where were
had
you?
some
What was
homework.
your excuse?
I was in Windhoek, Namibia.
Oh, well, someone has to do it, don't they, I suppose. Was it nice?
Well,
Did you have a good time?
I love Windhoek. Actually, my radio career started there by luck in 1990. So I owe that town specifically a whole lot, I think. It was serendipitous, absolutely. But that for another occasion. When we last spoke 2 weeks ago, I did suggest that there was a lot of activity in the cosmos up in the sky at this moment in time. And you said you were going to look at things.
I don't know about the one you specifically mentioned, but because I couldn't find any more about that one. But I did have a really interesting conversation with an astronomer a week or so ago, and we were talking about Apophis, which is a near-Earth object, which when she told me, I mean, I knew that this thing was a near-Earth object. I knew it was going to come back. She said on the 13th of September in 2029, this thing is going to fly about 20,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface, past us. Now, that's inside the orbit of some satellites. Now, we don't know whether the 13th of September is going to be a Friday. I hope not. But that seems that it will be so low that we will actually be able to stand on the Earth's surface and watch it. And that's very, very unusual. So stay tuned. You've got about 4 years to wait until this thing turns up, and then we'll all be able to watch it as long as it's not cloudy. I suppose that's one certainty, isn't it? It probably will be cloudy that day. But that is one interesting piece of activity that I will be watching this space, literally as well as metaphorically, to catch. But if you have a reference for the other interesting objects you've been following in the night sky,
Atlas and Swan. And there's a rendezvous at the end of this month behind the sun. So maybe you can check in on that, and because there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of very interesting stuff out there, and I've got a propensity for mysteries of mind, space, and time. You know that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, and that's why I'm asking you to guide me there.
I'll take a look.
Atlas and Swan. Thank you. Anthony writes, Morning, Clarence and Dr. Smith. A question for the scientist. I met for the first time in my life a girl with two different color eyes, one beautiful green and the other beautiful blue, natural. How does this happen? As this is something I've not seen before. I think Anthony needs to know that this person is definitely human.
It does happen. And the genetics of eye colour and the way eyes get their colour is complicated. And there are not one, not two, but multiple genes, which we inherit from our parents, of course, which determine eye colour. Now, in theory, the cells that give rise to our faces should have identical genes turned on in the two eyes, and therefore you should have matching eye colour normally. But there is an element of chance. And it is possible because of a process called mosaicism, which is that when we are putting our bodies together, certain cells will randomly deactivate one of the chromosomes, one of the X chromosomes. In girls, for example, you have two X chromosomes and you randomly turn one off. So cells will turn off randomly one X chromosome and not the other. And it is possible that you end up with a clutch of stem cells which have all the same chromosomes turned off in most of the cells on one side of the body, where the eye is going to form, for example, and on the other side. So you can end up with subtly different patterns of gene expression because of this process of mosaicism. And it may be, I don't know, but I'm speculating, and if anyone knows better, do please steer me in the right direction. But I would speculate that when we get this sort of thing happening, one explanation is that this is genetic mosaicism, perfectly normal, nothing unusual with that. The other possibility is that during embryonic development, the cells are in some way changed on one side of the body, or they're influenced to turn on or turn off certain genes more than others, and this subtly shifts the hue of the pigments that are giving the iris, which is the colour bit of the eye, its pigmentation. So I'd say either of those are possibilities. But again, if anyone who is a geneticist and knows even better, do let us know.
Definitely human. Then, Anthony, you can move to second base. What is vaginal thrush? Is it associated with jock itch? How does the one-day tablet applicator work and its effectiveness, please?
Right,
God's
okay.
promise.
Thrush is a very common condition, and it is caused by an overgrowth of candida, usually. Often, it's just candida. This is a yeast infection. Now, everyone has candida on their body. It's part of your microbiome, which is the assemblage of microorganisms that live on us and in us. And candida is very, very common. We find it everywhere, but usually at very low levels. And this is because the other parts of the microbiome outgrow the thrush and the candida and suppress it so it doesn't gain a toehold or become very, very overgrown. Also, the chemical environment of different bits of the body select for certain microbes and suppress the growth of others. Now, in the female genital tract, you have a lot of what are called Dodeline's lactogenic bacilli. Long words, but what that means is they basically produce acid. And when you have a lot of acid, it stops the candida growing. When you lose the acidity, which can happen for a range of reasons, other infections, other cleansing products. Some people think, oh, things are a bit itchy, I'll wash it better. And they use soaps and things like this. And those soaps are often quite alkaline. This will drive up the pH of the genital tract. And that has the effect of stopping the acid, suppressing the growth of the yeast. And you get an overgrowth. And it then can become a vicious cycle. And as a result of this, you then end up with soreness and the usual symptoms of thrush, which is soreness and itchiness. And references made to jock itch. Well, often skin fungal infections can be different. There are a range of different things that will do that, but you can trade fungal infections between men and women. There are some risk factors for that. Men who are not circumcised are more likely to pass on yeast infections or trade yeast infections with their partners, for example. But the good news is that most thrush infections respond very promptly to the drug clotrimazole. This is Canesten by the trade name, and you can get a pessary, which is effectively a big pill, and you pop it in, and within a day it has driven down or destroyed all the yeast, and the balance of microorganisms then returns to normal, and all the symptoms go away.
Okay, so just the context, I think, of this next question, a very prominent politician has been found guilty of discharging an automatic firearm into the air. So that happened in the past week, and I think that is the reason for this question. Let's take a listen, Joe.
Clary, Morum and Flourish of Augusta, Clarence. While I'm talking to you, I'm smiling, and certainly it's not a fake smile. Dr. Smith, when I stand and I firing a shot up in the air, and now it's traveling with massive amount of velocity and speed. But when it comes down, how far does it actually land from you? Yeah, I've tried it with a LMG and a 9mm Parabellum. I was standing in the water, in the dam. Fortunately, there was no one close. And I did not see any ripples for a good 10 minutes. So yeah, where does it normally end up, the distance? Have a good job. Bye-bye.
Interesting question, but dodgy. Be careful doing this. Every year people are injured, and sometimes fatally, by people firing guns up in the air, and then the bullets come back down and they hit somebody. And they may not be travelling as fast as when they left the gun, but they're still moving with appreciable speed, and they can be fatal. So be very, very careful if doing this. Now, why should the bullet be travelling at fatal speeds? Let's just address that, because people often overlook the physics here. When you fire the bullet out of the gun going straight up in the air, the bullet has kinetic energy imparted to it by the explosion of the chemical reaction that's in the cartridge, producing a lot of hot gas that accelerates the bullet down the barrel, and it leaves the gun. That kinetic energy, as the bullet climbs in the air, it's doing work against gravity, so it is converting the kinetic energy into gravitational potential energy. It's like you rolling a ball up a very steep hill. You are converting the work you're doing into gravitational potential energy, so when the ball reaches the top of the hill, it can roll down. So the bullet will get to a height in the air where the kinetic energy given to the bullet has been converted into gravitational potential energy, minus there will be some losses because of friction against the air. the bullet will then start to fall under the influence of gravity, converting that potential energy back into kinetic energy on the way down. Now, if we lived in a vacuum or with a very thin atmosphere like we're on Mars and you did this, the bullet would come back down to the ground travelling at almost the same speed as it left the gun, except it's now travelling vertically down towards the ground, and if you're underneath it, it would hit you very, very hard, equivalent to being shot from above by that gun. So this is why you have to be very careful. Wind resistance does slow the bullet down, and as it starts to fall, instead of being in a smooth trajectory travelling straight point forwards like when it leaves the gun, because there's no rifling in the atmosphere, the bullet will tumble on its way down and have more turbulence going past it. Therefore, it will lose more kinetic energy because of more friction. So it will be going slower, but it will still be going pretty fast. As it's moving through the air is moving because of wind, and therefore this will carry the bullet sideways away from the vertical track it was on. So even though it's falling straight down, it's also moving sideways at the same time, so it will not land near you necessarily unless the air is dead still. It's a bit like sailing a boat. If you sail in a straight line, you won't necessarily go in a straight line, because if the tide is going across you, you will go forwards through the water and sideways over ground because of the effects of the tide. It's the same with the wind blowing your bullet sideways.
Let's go to Anka. Anka in Belleville on the line with a question for Dr. Chris Smith. Welcome, Anka.
Thank you very much. Hi, Dr. Chris. How are you?
Hi, Anka. I'm very well. How are you?
Very, very good. Thank you. So I am a textile scientist and a sourcing specialist at TEP currently. And my question is, why would cationic finishes on fabric create the hydrophobic effect of the little droplets of water falling off the fabric?
Tell me more about this, because I don't know exactly what the question means. So just explain what you're referring to. I presume it's with dyeing. Is this when you do sort of exciting dyeing effects and get interesting fractal-like patterns?
Yes. So after dyeing, after you've put the color on the fabric, it goes through a finishing processes. Normally when you add like a softener onto the fabric, that makes the fabric feel nice and soft. But in some cases, depending on the charge of the finish, you get that effect where droplets actually, if you add water to the fabric, it just rolls off.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, I think you sort of, I don't know the answer to this because I'd need to look into it and look at what the chemicals are. But I think you're sort of hinting at it in your question, which is that when we mix different substances together, depending upon whether they like water or not, and that's down to whether they are polar, like water, or organic molecules, like oil, they do or don't mix. And also, charges on particles in water have a very strong effect on how the particles clump together. And so if you have clothing or material or a surface, this also has its own chemistry. That's going to have an effect with water or with oil-based substances. And the solvent, the stuff you put on there, is also going to have an effect. And so the pattern you see is going to be because the particles are going to either want to be in the water because they're charged, and water likes charged particles, like salt loves dissolving in water but won't dissolve in oil, for example, or they'll like being in oil and hate being in water. This means if you change the characteristic of the solvent, the particles will clump together. They will also interact with the surface, because some surfaces, as I say, some materials are going to be the water-loving or water-hating, and the combination of the solvent and the surface and the particles and the chemistry of all of those, and the fact that when you add different substances to affect the dyeing process, it can change the charge on the particles. All those things are going to interact and make the way in which they clump together, spread themselves out and bind onto surfaces different, and that is going to be the nature of the dyeing process that happens. And that's the art of the dyeing industry.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Anka, for the call. Have a nice day. Don't forget it's International Smile Day, Anka. Let's go to Lawrence. Lawrence, with the following question. Is it ever possible to transport one atom to another place in time and space without changing its structure? It's been done in science fiction movies. Can it be done in real
We always
life?
wanted one of those transporters that enabled James Kirk to say, "Beam me up, Scotty." I don't think he actually ever... Did he ever say, "Beam me up, Scotty," or did he just say Kirk to Enterprise? But I don't know if he actually asked Scotty to do that, but he definitely beamed up, didn't he? And this is the whole idea of having a way of dismantling all of the atoms and relationships of those atoms in a human body or something and moving it to a new place and reassembling them all in the right places. Now, there are trillions and trillions and trillions of atoms in a human being, and being able to take the positions of all of them and then move them somewhere else and reassemble them, that's extraordinarily difficult, which is why we've never done it. There is no way, as far as we know at the moment, of doing that with that level of complexity on that sort of scale. There are ways of entangling things together. If I take particles of light, for example, generate them in one place, and then so they're entangled, and then send them on a journey and then bring them back together, I can tell if they've gone down different routes to get together. This is how we're detecting gravitational waves, actually. So you can do it with light, particles of light, photons, because they are entangled at origin, but we can't take huge assemblages of atoms and move them from one place to another and reassemble them in exactly the same way that would mean you literally disappeared in one place and reappeared in another. Maybe in the future we'll be able to do that, but we certainly cannot do that at the moment.
A couple of voice notes in. We're going there next. Joe, what have you got for us?
Morning. Question for Dr. Chris. On the topic of mosquitoes, how do people who eat garlic cloves don't get mosquito bites? Because a number of people in my family says they eat garlic cloves, and in that way they never get any mosquito bites. And for some reason, mosquitoes only come to me throughout the year compared to them. And they say they eat garlic cloves.
I know vampires are scared of garlic, aren't they? So maybe the bites are from vampires. Who knows? But I think there's probably a couple of things to this. One slightly jokey answer with a slightly serious aspect to it, and the probably the more relevant, correct answer. The jokey answer I was going to say is mosquitoes smell us from a mile off. They smell our breath. They smell the carbon dioxide we breathe out. They're also very sensitive to heat and some other volatile chemicals that we release from our skin and also in our breath. So if you eat a load of garlic, you're going to stink, and probably people will stay away from you. Therefore, there will be fewer people in your near vicinity, and that means less CO2 in your near vicinity, and therefore less to attract mosquitoes. So maybe that's part of it. But more seriously, mosquitoes smell with their antennae, the two little things that project from their heads, and those antennae are bedecked with sensilla, which are tiny nerve endings that are covered in receptors or chemical docking stations for different molecules, and they can resolve across their two antennae where a smell is coming from, because if one antenna gets a slightly stronger signal than the other one, they know that on the side of their body where that antenna is, that's the source of the smell. So they fly backwards and forwards, slowly homing in on the source of these different smells, and they home in on carbon dioxide, other things that we breathe out, other things that come from our skin, and they will find those molecules, find their source, and that usually means they've got a food source. Now, some people just naturally smell awful to mosquitoes, and people have done experiments proving this. People release various chemicals from their skin that seem to put off mosquitoes. Other people produce fewer molecules from their skin that attract mosquitoes. So it's perfectly possible that if you eat certain things, the constituents of your diet could affect the way you smell. And one of the big drivers of the way we smell is the microbiome. The bacteria that live on our skin and inside us produce all kinds of smelly molecules, some of which do attract mosquitoes. So it is possible that in the same way that certain infections affect the microbiome and change our attractiveness to mosquitoes, and dengue virus seems to do this, it's possible that eating certain things will shift your microbiome, as well as directly also coming out through the skin in some cases, some chemicals, and that will affect your attractiveness to mosquitoes. I don't know how well documented the effect of garlic is, but I'm certainly willing to believe that it may have a subtle effect on some people.
Let's take one more voice note, Joe.
Hi, Dr. Chris Smith. Just to add on to the different eye colors, it's called heterochromia. We have two different eye colors. I felt very fancy for me being able to tell you that. Robin from Observatory.
Yep, that is true. I mean, we do see this, and hetero means different, and that's why when you're heterosexual, it's two different sexes. That's where it comes from, and chromia, colour, so different colour. It's absolutely right, but it's also jargon. And what we try to do in clear science communication is minimise the use of jargon and let plain speech triumph over jargon, which is what I was trying to do.
Thank you, Robin, for the jargon. We can squeeze in another one, Joe. Let's go.
Hi, Clarence and Dr. Smith. Won't you please just reiterate for the gentleman who is firing a gun into the air? I think his question was how far it will go, how far away from him can it land? And the answer, you rightfully said it's really dangerous to do that, and that is definitely correct. The answer is like miles. It can go miles away from you. So I think he is in the middle of a lake, or was in the middle of the lake, thinking it's safe because no one's around. Doesn't matter. It's miles and miles that this bullet can travel. And I know that if you drop a 1 rand coin off of a tall building and it lands on someone's head, it can go through their skull. So you can just imagine the weight of a bullet traveling from much, much higher. And it's really dangerous. And I think it's actually illegal to be firing a gun into the air, is it not?
Yeah, it definitely is illegal. And yeah, that politician was found guilty of discharging that firearm into the sky. Maybe just a response for that particular contribution, Dr. Smith?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, if it was a perfectly still day with no sideways movement of the wind, the bullet would come down back on you and bash you on the head, and it's very dangerous.
Oh.
But we are not in a perfectly windless place ever, so there will always be some lateral movement, so it will come down some distance away from you, most probably.
Dependent on the angle of discharge as well. We appreciate your time as always. Thank you, Chris. It's appreciated. And next week, Friday, again at 9:30, or just after those news headlines, you'll have an opportunity of taking your questions to the Naked Scientist.
You are with Cape Talk.
Views and news with Clarence Ford.